So in this week's video I'm going to be reviewing glass paints and outliner. It's the Lefranc Bourgeois. I've got several transparent ones and several opaque ones as well. As I say, I'm also reviewing the outliner. Not 100% happy using outliner from tubes, but I will do it because I think it's important to use the outliner which goes with the paints. While I get this ready, just point out I buy these paints myself. We're not sponsored by anyone. No one sends me paints and tells me or asks me to review them. So these are independent reviews. But in the end, it's just my point of view. Other people may feel differently. Right, I shall put that glass. Just a piece of old glass I've got left around. I think I'm going to have to move one of those. Probably move that one as well. There we go. Now they're not in the way of where I'm going to outline. I say I haven't even opened this outliner. Never used it before. These are water-based paints, and once baked they are supposed to be oven proof. Right, let's see how the very first outlining goes. Lift and pull as normal. We've got a little air bubble there. That's not bad. A lot of the question with outliner is, does it retain its shape as it dries? I say I much prefer using a piping bag, but we should be able to get at least reasonable results with this. As you can see, I'm making up lots of little squares. A little mess of that one. And these I'll be using to test the paints. And doing it on glass rather than perspex, which I usually run tests on, because obviously this is going to go in the oven and you can't put perspex in oven. Now I'm going to carry on. I'll do all the squares. I'm also going to do this design here, not the outer edges, but just the actual flower, and I'll show you what that's for in a little bit. But we need to do the outlining, and if we want it fully dry we need to leave it a day apparently, but I may come back to this a little bit sooner and I'll show you why. Okay, well, we're several hours later now, in fact about 4 hours later, and I did finish the boxes and I did pipe this piece as well. Now, it hasn't dried for the full day which it wanted. It's only been 4 hours, but that is hopefully allowing me to lift it off. I have already done a lot of this because it's quite time consuming, and I'm very slowly just peeling it off the glass. I wanted to make sure that I could try this technique using these outlines and using these paints. So very carefully. If it breaks, it's not the end of the world, but the less it breaks, the better. Now that should be it all off. I'm just going to try and space it out so it's roughly as it should be. Easier said than done. I do want to take it off of this sheet. I'm actually lucky enough to have this silicone sheet. Don't worry if you haven't got one. Any surface which isn't too sticky should do. I'm going to try and get it off onto the silicone sheet. I know those two leaves are at the top. Now, let's take my vase and hopefully just keep pace with the design, because there is another bit there. But there, hopefully you can see. It is now on the vase. I have got one more bit to do. I have already loosened this a little bit, so hopefully it won't take too much getting off. And obviously I'm going to add a couple more stems, etc. onto this tomorrow. It's just a different way. You can pipe straight onto the glass if you want, but generally, especially with more complicated designs, I find it better to work that way, and I was interested to see whether this outliner could do that technique, which it obviously has done. So saying, the outliner's held its shape really well. It wasn't difficult to pipe with, not as easy as a piping bag, but it wasn't difficult. So far, so good. I rather like it. Okay, let's put that to the side. I will just say I've given the paints a really good shake, getting them ready for tomorrow when I'll be using them. I've also diluted some down. I think it's diluted too far, even though I only used very small amount of water. It may be that the paints are fine as they are, but I have diluted some down, so we may as well try it and see what they look like as well. But that's for tomorrow. For tonight, we're going to just let all the outliner dry. We'll come back tomorrow and see how it is. Well, we're now on the next day. Everything's dry. The outline is nice and dry on the vase. Just put off that. And this is our test piece. So we're ready to start actually painting. Yay! And to start with, I'm going to use my solid paintbrush and just do a row of normal colours straight from the pot. He said, as long as he can get the pots open. There we go. I'm not going to try and use the little hole in the top of the pots. I'm going to go straight into the main pot itself. This gold. Put silver next to that. Obviously I'm working flat here, so I can use the flood fill method. Get a nice smooth finish. So that was silver. Now we'll try a couple of the colours, or I should say we'll try a couple of the transparent colours. Let's start with blue. So this is sky blue. Green. Red, obviously. This is a cherry red, I think, or berry red. Red currant, something like that. And finally, we'll try the yellow. And these paints are flowing rather well. I'm sounding worried because I have added some water to test the paints, which I'll bring out in a minute. Not these are straight from the pot, as you can see. But I have done somewhere I've added water, and I think from that they are going to flow too well, but we will see. So starting here, let's start with the ones I've only added a little bit of water to these. 2 ml into 15 ml. So 2 ml of water to 15 ml of paint. The idea was, I thought the paints were going to be a little bit thicker, which actually the gold and the silver, the opaque ones, were. But I thought they were all going to be a bit thicker, which is why I've watered some down. It probably wasn't necessary. That's watered down a little. The yellow, this one's been watered down a little. Now I've got two more which have been watered down even more. Now these were 5 ml to 15 ml, so 5 ml of water to 15 ml of paint. I will, when I'm letting this dry, make sure the board's put on a very even surface. So the paint doesn't flow down. And again, this one has been watered down quite a lot, and again 15 ml water, sorry, 5 ml water to 15 ml of paint. Now finally, I want to do some blends to see how blends work, so I will use these last squares. I think we haven't used the white yet, so let's do a blend with some white in this square. Again, the opaque seems to be slightly thicker than the transparent. It's not really an issue, but it is worth keeping in mind. And we'll go sky blue in this. That should make a nice blend, I hope. Obviously, you don't want to mix the colours up, contaminate them in the pots. So I'm just dropping this in. I do like blending transparent paints with opaque ones. It gives, or normally gives, a very nice almost marble look to it. Let's try two transparents. There we go. So we'll let all that dry. In fact, we'll let it dry for a day, then we'll put it in the oven. I'll show you what it's like after a day's drying and show you again what it's like after it's gone into the oven. So we can just put that to a side for a minute. And I'll say I will be checking that that goes somewhere flat as soon as we've finished. And now we've got this vase. Now obviously this is a curved surface, slightly more difficult to do. I'm going to do it teeny little bit at a time. And you just need to prop this so it doesn't roll. And we'll start there with the red, and for this I'm going to use a brush. I don't often brush paint, but certainly when I'm doing curved surfaces like this I do. The other thing I do is to make sure it's ever so slightly warm before we start painting. That makes the paint dry quicker, less chance of it running. So let's warm up those sections. Close your ears for a second. Now the trick here is we're not flood filling, we're brush painting. Get enough paint on to make it look smooth, and not so much that it's going to run all over the place. There's a bit of a delicate balance, but as always we want to make sure we get right up to the lines. There we go. I'm just going to give it a quick blast, not too much, I don't want to damage the finish, but just a quick blast with the hairdryer again. This is obviously going to take a while to do. I need to leave that to go tacky dry until I move it around and do the next bit, but I will do it gradually, bit by bit. Okay, we'll leave things to dry and we'll come back and see how they are. Okay, the paints have dried overnight and here's the result. Need to explain this. A clever dog who shall remain nameless decided it'd be a great idea to jump up at the table whilst this was drying, put his paw straight into that. As you can see, the colours have turned out really, really good. I'm very pleased with them. Gold and the silver. The transparents are very transparent. Really love this effect. As I said, it's very much a marble effect. That's just using the blue transparent together with the white opaque, and the transparents blend well as well. These are the ones I've watered down, and there's actually not a lot of difference there at all. It hasn't really had much of an effect, even though I was worried that I'd watered them down too much. They did flow a little bit better, so that's nice. As you can see, the vase is just about completed. I need to do a little bit more outlining on that. Just join the bud, put some dots in. We'll do that in a second. But anyway, so far, really happy with these paints. Most people know I'm a bit of a Pebeo fan, but these are equally as good. Can't separate the two. This is now going to go into the oven. So we'll put it to the side for a minute, and that'll be going straight into the oven as soon as I've finished recording this. Okay, as I said, we've got a little bit more outlining to do. Let's just turn that off for a second. Get back. There we go. And there we go. Obviously this is going to have to wait until tomorrow before it can be put into the oven, so that outliner has time to dry. But we'll put the test piece into the oven now and see how it goes. Well, everything's been in the oven, come out, cooled, and this is the result. Now on the whole, I'm really pleased. The colours are vibrant. Even when I've watered them down, it hasn't made much difference. There is a slight split in that one, and it could be a result of watering it down, but then the one which I watered down even more seems to be totally smooth. The one issue I have had, I don't know whether you can see this, let's move that out of the way. Now the gold and the silver have quite a few bumps in them. They look like a bit like air bubbles, but I don't think they are. But there are quite a few bumps in there and there. And I have had a similar thing on the vase in places, but not all the time. Now, looking at it, it seems to be where the paint would have flowed down to and therefore would have been thicker. So, and same with the gold and silver, they were quite thick, so they ended up being on there quite thick. So I'm wondering if I've actually either put it on too thickly, or because it was thicker I should have given it longer to dry before I put it into the oven. Either of those could be possible, so I'll experiment a little bit more. But on the whole, I have been really pleased with these paints, and I'd certainly use them again. Probably do them not quite so thick in any places, but particularly that marble effect and the blend effect and even the solid colours all turned out really well. Okay, that's my review of the paints. Obviously it's a personal opinion, but I will look forward to using them in a project in the very near future. Happy crafting. He knows he's being talked about. Right, come see you. Right, there's the culprit. You got to look over there. Yeah, you're not getting near that again, buddy. You're not getting near that again. Right, so is paw print went in there, and that's why that is like that, and we're not doing it again. As you can see, the right, I think you can go down now. Say bye-bye. Yeah, okay.